Well, good afternoon. My name is Dr. Renee Morel, and it is such a pleasure to join this Wave Youth Conference. We are excited. I am currently the Director of Community Engagement at Araminta Freedom Initiative, which is a nonprofit organization dedicated. Our whole mission is to end human trafficking for all children and that no child be engaged in this issue. Now, I am currently the director of communication, but before I got this position, I was actually the victim specialist with the FBI. I stayed with the FBI for 40 years. And during my time working as the victim specialist or the social worker for the FBI, I really became involved in human trafficking and helping youth who were involved in this just find their way back and really start the healing project process. So I have a lot of interesting stories to tell, but mostly I just wanted to say that there is so much work still being done, and we want you to really engage in this conversation. We want to have a really good conversation about that. And with that, I want to introduce my colleague and a wonderful guy, Richard Williams. Please, Richard, introduce yourself.
Hi, thank you very much, Renee. Hi, I'm a volunteer with Araminta Freedom Initiative, or Araminta, as we call it in short there, and a certified presenter and certified volunteer. And I got involved with the organization when about 8 years ago, one of my daughters was in college and came home talking about human trafficking and domestic minor sex trafficking and how prevalent it was today. So when she mentioned it, I started seeing those phrases or those initials on the news and in articles and started reading more about it, got looking into it. And then our church offered an opportunity to get some training. They call it Awaken training through Araminta. And I jumped on that opportunity and have been involved one way or another ever since, and was able to last year finish all of the certified presenter training and have had a chance to do some of the training sessions a couple times. So really believe in the ministry of Araminta and am excited to share a little with you today. Uh, Dr. Renee, back to you. I'm going to go ahead and share our screen so we can see our presentation here.
So, what would you do if I told you, what would you think if I told you that we have really set this new generation up for failure? We have really, not intentionally, but this is what we have done. I can assure you that it was our intention to really equip young people with everything that they need. But sometimes when it comes down to this word of sex, we have not always done a good job of giving you the information you need to protect yourself. And that's for a lot of reasons. But what we do know is that we want you to understand by the time you leave this conference or this particular breakout that we want to arm you with all the tools that you need to make informed decisions, to protect yourself, to protect people that you care about, and to know how to get resources should you need them. Now, this can be some pretty serious discussion. It can really invoke some really uncomfortable moments. So that if you ever feel really that it's just overwhelming for you, we want you to get off the screen, to find a trusted adult that you can talk to. Call a parent if you can. But if you can and you really need someone to talk to, we just put my phone number up and I want you to call me because what we want to do is just talk to you through it and help you to overcome any uncomfortable feelings you might feel doing this if you should experience anything because of that. So we're gonna get started right now. So please, we're gonna play a little game. I know you all are familiar with this game, The Price is Right. It's been around forever, like before I was even born, but it's been around forever. And if you know anything about this game, you know that we're going to show you some items and we're going to give you a brief description of these items. And you are to write down in the chat room the value that you think, how much you think these items cost. And whoever hits the closest amount of the actual price without going over actually wins. So let's get started. So come on down, Richard. Can you tell us some things about these items, please?
I sure can. We have a Starbucks venti caramel frappuccino. Buttery caramel syrup meets coffee, milk, and ice for a rendezvous in the blender. Then whipped cream and caramel sauce layer the love on top. Audience, if you could please type your prices that you think this is without going over in the chat. We have a $4.35. We have a $4.99, $7.50, $5.39, $6, another $6, a $5.75, and the actual retail price is $4.95. Thank you all for playing. On to our second item that we're going to share with you today. This is an Enjoy Rasta Panda complete skateboard with a 7.5-inch width and 31-inch length. Traditional 7-ply construction deck, green, black, slant, royal forged aluminum trucks, and 53mm Enjoy Panda Rasta wheels. All right, contestants, let's put your bid in now. Got a 19, we've got a 54.99, got 100, 67, 149.30, 132, 92, 101. Well, those are excellent guesses. We actually found this at a retail price of $54.95. And third, we have the Xbox One X Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order Deluxe Edition bundle, and experience the thrill and challenge of becoming a Jedi. Engage in innovative lightsaber and force combat on a galaxy-spanning adventure as you stay one step ahead of the Empire and its deadly Inquisitors. Continue your training, explore the mysteries of the Force, and become the Jedi you were meant to be. This bundle includes an Xbox One and Xbox wireless controller, a full game download of Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order Deluxe Edition, and a 1-month Xbox Live subscription. What do you think the retail price for this is? We see $249, $500, $500, $400, $397, $200, $500, $500. The actual retail price is $349.99. So let's see what we have next. Well, that's a little unexpected, isn't it? It doesn't seem quite right. It looks like outlines of people, but in reality today in the United States, boys and girls are bought and sold. Does anyone know what this is called? You can put that in the chat. Human trafficking. Absolutely. Child sex trafficking. Human trafficking, child labor. Those are all good answers and right on the money. So how do we define this human trafficking? Can you think about this and type your answers in the chat again? What is human trafficking? Selling humans for sexual exchange for money. People are kidnapped and sold. Those are some pretty good answers. The definition that we use is pretty standard today is the buying and selling of people. So when we talk about human trafficking and how one form of human trafficking involves the sexual exploitation of our youth, that's what we're here really to talk about today. And empowered youth, when you get done with this class, if this is your first introduction, especially formally, that you're going to have just a better understanding of human trafficking and how it affects our community, how it affects your community. So we want you to walk away with that understanding and be prepared to protect yourself and the people that you care about from this issue. And We're going to spend some time talking about the things that can lead to exploitation and prepare you to respond if you ever see something that looks like it could be trafficking. So one of the answers was people are kidnapped and sold. And that's really what I thought it was back before my daughter started talking to me about it. I started looking into it. We're going to go into more detail about the exploitation that happens, about the ways that people are lured into domestic minor sex trafficking, or DMST. And we're going to talk about so you have a better understanding about that exploitation and how you can respond if you think someone is a victim of a crime. So I'm going to pass this back now to Dr. Renee.
Thank you so much, Richard. So trafficking, let's talk a little bit about trafficking and what trafficking is. It actually is the illegal buying and selling of goods, drugs, stolen items. Trafficking can be the illegal purchase of anything. You can traffic cigarettes and guns, and you can traffic anything. And it's all illegal. So when you think about trafficking, it is not just buying and selling of items, it is the buying and selling of illegally of things. So what we're talking about today is in this particular session is going to be domestic minor sex trafficking. Like someone mentioned labor trafficking. Labor trafficking is something we don't talk highly enough about, but for that, and that is giving working and not being paid and being forced to work. But for this particular class, we're going to talk mostly about domestic minor sex trafficking. And when we mention domestic, we're talking about US citizens. A lot of time we've seen taken on TV, we've seen so many things in which you may see foreign nationals coming to the United States, and that much is true. But in my experience, there is so much more trafficking of US citizens. We're talking US citizens. And when we talk about minors, we're talking about those under the age of 18. So this class, we're talking about US citizens, children, youth under the age of 18 who are involved in sexual exploitation. This is also sometimes called DSMT or CST, child sex trafficking. It is, and let me be very clear, this is a form of abuse that occurs when a child who is under the age of 18 is bought and sold, advertised, solicited, exploited through a commercial sex act. Now, that word commercial sex act is very important because this is the distinction between just consensual sex and exploitation. In order for it to be sex trafficking, there has to be an exchange of something of value for the sex acts. So it can be an exchange of money, but not always money. Sometimes it may be an exchange of drugs or a gift or someone trying to get their hair done for sex, or a cell phone, the new cell phone for sex, a place to stay or food. So sometimes it's just about survival. And or even an adult may exchange food and a place to stay in exchange for the sex act. But youth, and I really want to make this clear. If we get nothing else, a couple of things out of this training, I want you to know that youth under the age of 18 by federal law will be seen as victims in this. And that's really clear. So even if you have a youth who is 17 who tells you, I know what I was doing. I I kind of like this. If she says anything or he says anything like this, it was my choice. They do not have a choice, or they don't have the capacity to make that decision. They can't buy a car. They can't get credit cards when they're 17. They have to wait until 18. They can't do a lot of things as minors. They cannot they cannot consent to a commercial transaction. So that exchange of money or drugs or a cell phone for sex is something that they can't consent to do. So that is the main point. Also, what I want to tell you is also this thing about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and this is something that you probably may not have experienced, but Maslow was a psychologist and he talked about motivation. And so what he suggests in his theory is that in order For someone to be motivated to move from one level to the next, they have to satisfy that basic level. And the basic level of physiological is just the basic needs of food and shelter and taking care of yourself. You cannot think about how am I going to get good grades in school or anything else if you don't have a place to stay, or if you're hungry, or if you don't have that security of knowing just basic needs being met. So often, a trafficker will use that as a way of getting to a youth. If that youth or someone is vulnerable, if they don't have their basic needs met, if they are hungry, need a place to stay, you may be so desperate that that youth may consent to exchanging sex for just their basic needs. And so that's why we wanted to illustrate that this is how this can happen so easily. So, do you know how we defined vulnerability? So maybe you could type that what you think vulnerability is in the chat. Any idea of what vulnerabilities are? We talked about a youth being vulnerable if they didn't have their basic needs met, the physiological needs met. Okay, let me tell you what it means. It means that someone is at risk of harm or being taken advantage of. So that is what vulnerability is. So why are children so vulnerable to recruitment? Well, these are some of the vulnerabilities. If a youth has run away from home, and when we say run a chronic runaway, I'm talking about 3 times in their lifetime. So if you know a youth who may have experienced running away or homelessness, it makes them particularly vulnerable. Being out on the streets alone with no adult supervision to protect you, it makes them, where are they going to eat? How are they going to eat? How will they sleep? So that just alone, homelessness can make someone vulnerable. And what we have found, and I worked a little bit at NCMEC, and I know that a lot of youth, about 17% of those who run away from care of the social service system, this is child welfare, who were reported missing, were likely child sex trafficking victims. So some of the other things that make youth so vulnerable to this is those who don't feel love or a sense of belonging, or they feel, or they may have been abused somewhere in the home or in the neighborhood or at school, anywhere that they don't feel safe, it makes them vulnerable. And like we talked before, if they don't have their basic needs met, like food, shelter, or clothing, it can also make them vulnerable. So these are some of the risk factors. And some of those are societal, these are systemic issues that make you so vulnerable. Things like racism, bullying, lack of resources, being in the child welfare system, affiliation with the gangs, or appearance, or something like that. It could be a history of just, you know, normalizing sexual behavior or abuse. If a youth have seen their other people in their household. We talked a lot about childhood experiences. If there's domestic violence in the household, sexual abuse, or somebody in the family who has a mental health issue, immigration status. Can't you imagine that if someone who is undocumented meet someone else and they say, if you don't do this, I will report you I will try to get you deported. And so we're going to call Homeland Security and try to get you immigration and get you deported. So those who are undocumented can be hugely vulnerable. Instability in home, trauma. If you have a history of trauma, low self esteem, substance abuse, all these things can lead someone to being very vulnerable and at risk for being trafficked. So we wanted to put this up because sometimes we don't really look at those in the LGBTQ plus community and how very high. And the new statistics suggest that this minorities, and why minorities is important, because children in these categories are at a higher risk of running away from home or being put out of their home. So being a sexual minority youth is a clear risk factor for being exploited, and this group is really rising. They have very few support, and they can be targeted by traffickers who know this and will traffic them because of their vulnerability.
So one of the questions that I had when I was first introduced to the topic was, does it happen in my state? So what do you think? Does human trafficking and domestic minor sex trafficking happen in your state? Prospect Youth Group says yes. Beverly says yes. Laura says yes. Yeah, and yes. Yes. Well, reports of minors being trafficked have happened in every county in Maryland, as we know, looking through. Mosquito has the worst county, 2016, most likely yes. As a matter of fact, let's jump to this map for a minute. So between June 2013 and June 2020, there have been 829 cases of sex trafficking identified across 24 counties in Maryland alone. So this is identified just in the state of Maryland. So the Polaris project actually tracks this, and you can see their logo down here in the bottom corner. We're going to give a reference link later on near the end in a resource section, but the Polaris project say they receive 48,326, or they received 48,326 calls about human trafficking in 2019 alone. So what do you notice is, like somebody mentioned earlier, that here along that 95 corridor, there's a lot of dark red, and the darker the red, the more calls have been for that area. So this whole chunk all the way down through into Florida, and you see it's not just along the 95 corridor, here along the Great Lakes area, we've got several all throughout, and then along the whole west coast of the United States. We've even got a bunch of calls in Hawaii going on, and Alaska. So all throughout the United States, this is going on, and many children who are being trafficked are still attending school. Some are going home at the end of the day. It's still really, really prevalent. So how
And
many
another
people?
thing, and
Yes.
another thing, Richard, that I just wanted to say about that map is that these are reported cases. So these are the ones that were reported. There are so many youth, because this is such a hidden issue, that they weren't reported. So I think this is underrepresented, but I just wanted to know these are reported cases. So many youth go missing or are trafficked that never are reported. Sorry,
Thank you very much. And how many people under the age of 18 are at risk of sex trafficking in the US each year? What do you think? Why don't you type a number in there? How many people under the age of 18 are at risk of sex trafficking in the US every year? A lot. Chris O'Donnell says a lot. Over 500. Yes, it's over 500. Oh, who's got some other number guesses here? Let me give you a clue. Now, I'm a Miami Dolphins fan, but this is the Raven Stadium here in Baltimore, which is next door, and it's in the same city as Araminta is. 225 million, 10,000. So the Raven Stadium in Baltimore, Maryland holds 71,008 people officially. So you think there's more or less than in here that can fit in this stadium? More than 71,000? 5,000? More. Chris O'Donnell says more. Well, thank you very much for your entries. If we were to try to fit all of the victims of domestic minor sex trafficking, so just those that are 18 and younger, domestic minor sex trafficking into the Raven Stadium, it could not hold them all, because more than 100,000 youth are at risk of this type of sexual exploitation each year. As a matter of fact, we've got a few bullets here to share with you. When minors who are victims of sex trafficking were asked the age at which they were first trafficked, the average age was 15 years old. Did you catch that bullet? If the average age is 15, that means that for every child who is 18 years old when they were first identified, first trafficked, then there is a 12-year-old out there who was 12 when they were first trafficked. But that average age is 15. And the average life expectancy of a trafficked victim is 7 years. So what that means is that if somebody starts being trafficked when they're 15, they probably will not make it to their 22nd or past their 22nd birthday. They will probably only live for 7 more years after 15 if they don't get out of the industry and get some help. So anybody online today know of any 15-year-olds? Anybody, are you 15 or have a sibling maybe, or a neighbor or a classmate or a teammate on some sport program, someone in your youth group that's 15? Probably most of us know at least one, if not multiple. Well, the estimated annual revenue of human trafficking worldwide is 150 billion, 150 billion, and 99 million a year for sex trafficking alone. And that number represents almost 3.5 times the annual profits from the NBA, the NFL, the MLB, and the NHL combined. Those four, I want to say big American sports, those four sports combined, the 99 billion from sex trafficking alone represents more than what's all through there. So a lot of times you may hear or you may talk about or you see portrayed on TV a child teen prostitute, somebody who's 15, 16, 17, and this is what he or she has decided to do. And what's the difference between a child teen prostitute and a victim of child teen trafficking? So in your chat, you can put, victim equals and describe it, prostitute equals, describe it, or if it's something that's the same, you can write both equals and whatever your answer is. So let's see what you think about that. What is the difference between these two, or in what ways are they similar? Do we lose people? We're not getting any responses yet. No difference. Laura says no difference. Prostitution is a choice depending on the person's situation, but trafficking isn't. They are taking without consent. Well, actually, in the eyes of the federal government, there's no such thing as a teen or child prostitute. Now, this is true for several reasons, and Dr. Renee already talked about it. If you're under 18, there are certain things and laws in place. So of the two people, if one person is under 18 and he or she is selling or trading goods and services or has been threatened into doing something, and when we talk about commercial sex, it may be posing for pictures. That may be all, and I say all, that may be all it is posing for pictures, or being videoed doing something where there isn't even touching by anybody else. But if the person that's being filmed is under 18, that's against the law. So any of those acts that is happening, even if they say they're consenting, that's against the law. So legally speaking, anyone under the age of 18 who is being sexually exploited or involved in some commercial sex industry or sex act is a victim, even if they say they're choosing to do it. And we already talked a bit about this. So what choice are they actually making? Well, remember Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Maybe they're trying to help their family pay the rent. Maybe they're trying to get a phone because their family couldn't afford to give them a cell phone. They want one to fit in like everybody else, or they really want to have money to go to a concert and their parents or their parent or their guardians just can't provide that, and they don't know what to do. So another important part is that the teen brain is not finished growing yet. Now, I know we often say that our kids are growing up fast today, and we can't speed up how fast their brain matures though. So let's talk a little about this.
Okay, so let's,
yes, go ahead, Dr. Renee.
okay, let's talk about the teen brain, because this is so important in trying to understand how youth can be so vulnerable to this. And this is because the brain development, and this is just the way it is, the brain develops from the back to the front. So the last part to really develop is the prefrontal cortex, so that frontal lobe, that pink part right there, is the last part. And now that part is the functioning of thinking through, planning, organizing. It's responsible for just realizing consequences. And if that is the last thing to develop, then is why so many people see youth as being risk taking a lot of risks. Yeah, because they kind of do. They don't really see the consequences that if I do this, this may happen. And that's just because they just don't have the capacity to be able to do that because their prefrontal cortex is not fully developed. And then some research suggests that it won't be quite developed fully until maybe in their 20s. So that is why perhaps they are not, don't have the capability to even think about if this happens, what what is the consequences of some. All they know is that this seems like fun, or okay, it seems like I'm gonna get some money for this and it's not really nothing I can do. I mean, I'm just gonna get through it. I'm gonna do take some pictures for money, or I'm gonna do something. I had a case recently, and I don't work with the FBI anymore, but people still call me from time to time and ask me to consult. And I had a father who called me because his daughter on her Cash App had been receiving money from a guy, an older guy, who was giving her money to show pictures of her feet, just her feet. And I know she was thinking, this is a 16-year-old, that "Huh, I can give money for my feet. Let me take a pictures of my feet." She did not quite understand that this was just part of a grooming process. Today it was feet. Tomorrow he might say, "Let me see your arms and I'll give you $1,000." And then it would be some other parts. And next thing she knows, she's in this thing for money and she has normalized this behavior that it's okay. And he's kind of said, "Oh wow, she will take money for stuff on her for me seeing pictures of her. So let me go a little further." And he just, he's talking to her. He's there acting like this is normal behavior. This is not, and can easily go down the wrong way. And often when we were talking about teen prostitution and youth who are victims, words do matter. When you call someone, or when people see youth out there and say, "Oh, she's just prostituting." Well, think about this. This youth was young. She just thought that she was going to get a job. She was going to get a modeling career, a rap career. This guy was telling her that he loved her, and she believed it because this is the age where you really do want to believe it. And if he gave you stuff too, "I love you so much, you're so beautiful," and he's telling you these things before he tells you to do some other things, you want to believe it. And if this youth had been trapped in this, and then they all of a sudden they turn 18 one day and the things change. Now, 18, they are older. So I do believe that many of those who are still in this game at 18, 19, adults who could definitely be arrested for prostitution, I guarantee you that it probably started before they were 18. So, and they just couldn't figure out how to get out of it. They felt the shame and the blame of it, and they couldn't figure out. So, it's been in my experience that this has started way before that. And just understanding that the prefrontal cortex, or their brain, really doesn't have the capacity to think of or to really kind of organized, that this could have some tremendous and very trauma provoking effects on them later. They just not thinking about that. That's a more adult level. And when you think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, what we talked about before, it may have been that they just needed it. They just needed this just to make a living, just to provide for myself. I'm struggling, and I don't have someone who's taking care of me. So this 15-year-old is fending for themselves out there on the streets, and they have to do what they have to do to survive. So oftentimes you'll have what is termed to be survival sex out there on the streets. If you do not have the food and you need to just live, who or take care of your brothers and sisters, or heaven forbid that they have children, just to have to feed your kids, young kids. Kids having kids at 16 may even have a child, and she has to feed them. Then what would she do to keep that child alive? Almost anything. So sometimes we have to be more sensitive when we see them, and ask ourselves, what need is that youth not getting that would lead them to do that? What are they not getting? And oftentimes it's an unmet need. And that seasoning and grooming and that manipulation, that vulnerability that they have, and the manipulation by the trafficker is what happens. So I'm convinced that young people, that nobody decided when they woke up that one morning that I wanted to do this for a living. So we want to talk now about where do you think the recruiting for trafficking takes place? So this is something that I just wanted you to think. What do you think? How does traffickers even know how to reach young people? Where do you think this is happening? If you can just put some thoughts in the chat, we can discuss it. But where do you think that this stuff is happening? Online, 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 social media. Absolutely. I left the bureau in 2019, the FBI in 2019, but I have so many friends and agents that are still there. And I was asking them, it used to be a time when the traffickers would meet youth at the mall because it was like a gazillion of youth at the mall. And wherever you have a lot of youth, you will definitely find traffickers there. Malls are closed now. You may still have some trafficking. There are still trafficking that is not online, but let me tell you, this is where you can find it at schools, malls, bus stops, streets, group homes, foster homes, young shelters, homeless places, website, or every social media platform is there is some advertising and some recruiting being done. Every social, I'm talking TikTok and we're talking musically and all the ones that I don't even know about that come up every day. Instagram, all of these, Snapchat, Facebook. Facebook is usually now for old people. So I don't know how many young people are on Facebook since the old people taking over Facebook. But I have seen before I left so many recruitment methods using games. And because if you can imagine, the games are generally in the bedroom of youths. They are in the bedroom and they are on them pretty much, and they can talk to anyone all over the world. So in essence, when you allow someone that you're talking to that you really don't know, but that you just met through an online app, when you are letting a stranger into your bedroom because you don't really know this and you didn't meet them, but this is what I've seen happen. So these social medias are just the emphasis on this. This is the place where they are tricking young people, playing games with them. These are usually older people who are pretending to be 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds who are gaming with young people, getting them to the next level. They spent their entire life figuring out how am I going to trick this young person into doing something like going to a chat room. So they may be talking to you and grooming you and getting all this information from you, and telling you all these things um, through a game for months, 3 or 4 months before they ask you, "Hey, let's go into this chat room and talk." And then because it is still at an age where certain things that people talk about, maybe a little sex, I show you your mine, you show me yours, that kind of thing has happened, and they take a picture of you and then they blackmail the youth and say, if you don't do more, I will put it on. I know I already have your Instagram account, and I'll put it on YouTube, and I'll put it on. So they actually extorting young people, just and never ever met them, but just to blackmailing them online. And I have seen so many cases of this happening and this exploitation of youth just because of this. Um, One FBI agent reports that at any given moment, there are 70,000 predators online trying to connect with youth, trying to connect with youth. So what we did was put up some emojis that may not seem to that people may not see. These are some methods that they use, and some of this is just to because there are so many apparatus out there to try to that law enforcement uses to catch text when people are advertising. Traffickers have gotten really clever, so they use some of these emojis to kind of try to get youth and try to kind of guys or get through some of the stops and the blocks that we have set up. So these are some of those emojis that are used. It can be difficult sometimes, and they will try to circumvent text recognition, and also they will use things like this. And in this first screenshot that we have, for example, it's an emoji symbolizing innocence, that then the suggestion is of getting hooked up and then it'll be sweet and juicy, or some reference to the corn being porn. And some of the other ones is the second on the left is a student who took a picture of herself and she posted it in full outfit representing her culture. And someone commented on that and offered to send her money in a cash app. And of course, the last one is a grooming process in which they normalize the exchange of money for pictures, seemingly innocent. And this was something like the one that I talked to you about, where they were just asking this person to send some pictures. Not, I'm not asking you to do anything. I'm just, you don't want to send some pictures. I'm going to give you some money. I mean, like, really? Who is going to give you money, or what alternative motive would they have to do this? So I just want you to know that it's out there and they will use any means necessary to take advantage of you. So, in the next one, we want to talk about the process of control. So, that recruitment period where they are trying to get youth or lure them in, I can't tell you how many cases I had where youth were lured in through a love interest. So this guy that they meet either online or in person is telling them and selling them a dream. I know it's hard at home. I know things are difficult and your parents don't quite understand, but I understand. And then if you throw money at it, or I can send you a cell phone that your mom doesn't have, an iPhone 13, the latest one, and they will invest in all of this money to get your hair done, nails done. I want you to look nice. You look so good. You're so beautiful. And all the child, this youth is thinking, out of all the people that he saw, he chose me. And so they feeling like, this could be true. Or this could be the truth. And then um, with the sense of trust and the belonging, and then the isolation from your family, and then trying to break you down and ask you to test boundaries, like, we could have this wonderful life. I can see us going to traveling the world, going to LA. I got this career. You're such a beautiful, you could be a model. I want to support you, and I'm going to buy you clothes and get you picked up, and you're thinking that this is wonderful and this is your ticket out of, being independent. And this is the thing, this guy loves you. And then at some point it turns ugly. And they may say, you need to do this in order for this dream to come true. And then this young person is so caught up in this person that they will pretty much do anything to try to keep that love, and including be turned out into a sexually exploited, or to participate in some commercial sex act. And by commercial sex act, it could be stripping, and it could be just taking inappropriate pictures of yourself and sending it to other people. All these things are illegal. They're felonies. And I just want you to know it's not acceptable. And nobody who loves you would ever ask you to do those things. So there are some physical signs of trafficking that we have come to find out. This is not anything one sign. These are some warning signs, but any one of these by itself would not be so much cause, but it may give us some idea that this young person may need some help. Truancy. Those who are not engaged in school, leave school, hook school. Traffickers are looking for those at 12 o'clock, 11 o'clock, who should be at school, got your uniform on, and walking down the street would be a perfect prime target for someone to come roll up on and say, "Hey, what are you doing? You want to go with me? We can have fun. I buy you some food. We can do this. Let's hang out." And that would be, getting in a car with someone who sees you just because he's knowing that this youth should be at school and is not at school. So it may be something there I can use. Or a boyfriend, noticeably an older boyfriend. How many girls or guys that I know are being hooked up with someone in their 20s. They're in their teens. This person looks like they're in their teens, but sometimes they are older and say, "I'm 20 years old, but you're so mature for your age and you look so wonderful." So getting connected with someone who is substantially older than you, or an adult, can be a sign, or signs of drug addiction, or trying to get someone to use drugs, because then they can use that to get you in an altered state of mind. Or even those who for whatever reason, their peers have labeled them to be fast, promiscuous. Sometimes that will have a really detrimental effect on that youth. But sometimes just physical. We're not going to discount that some traffickers are just physically violent and youth are scared. They're just afraid. I do this because he will hurt me. He's threatened to kill my family. He's threatened to kill me. He will hurt me. I believe it. I've seen it. And so those are some warning signs. If they have bruises, physical trauma, they usually kick. Sometimes they call it Timming, where they will take their Timberlands and kick you. So they have head injuries and brain damage. Tattoos and branding. Often we would see tattoos on the youth just to signal that she is my possession. So he may brand his name and say that this girl is mine, daddy's girl. He'll put his name on her to tell everybody in the world that she belongs to me as if she is a property. So these are some of the techniques that and some of the physical signs that we've noticed that can be kind of signs that we look for to see if this youth is in trouble and how can we help if we see any of these signs. So these are some of the things that we can do to try to keep youth a little safer. Um, for those adults that are on this call, it is okay to review or even really have a conversation with your young person about their social networking activities and their profile. Or ask them, because I don't know a lot, but I ask my grandchildren, what is it? I don't understand TikTok. Tell me what the fascination is. We cannot ignore it. It is here to stay. We need to get involved, know how these social networking applications work and how what the people are saying about this and what kind of activity is going on. Discuss with your youth or talk to your youth about how much information, they personal information, they should be sharing with someone else and exactly what, even if they're not sharing personal information, just exactly what you're talking about. Are you talking too much about people going away, you're going to be home? So it's not just personal information, it's the content of the information that they're talking about. And be able to set privacy apps on there so that you can try to set up some way of guarding. Everybody don't need to know everything and everywhere you've gone and where you've been. Review and discuss how you should qualify and what is considered to be a trusted individual and friend, and how that impacts safety. And Google people's telephone numbers. That is so important, to Google people's telephone numbers. And a lot of times, I know that in my age, which is way back, we used to think it was okay if very young children, we used to even tell them, go hug such a stranger, go hug Uncle such and such. And if Pete, you feel uncomfortable about hugging, I would not say that you had to make your youth hug certain people or do any of those things. If your youth feel uncomfortable, trust their instinct. Teach them to trust their instinct. If you feel that thing that you feel, that it doesn't feel easy, it doesn't feel right, trust it and just take a step back and pause and say, you know what, I'm feeling something. What I don't know about this. At least take a pause. Take a blink, take a deep breath and say, let me ask some questions about that. Let me ask my parent about that. Or let me ask some other trusted adult or some other friend that I trust about this because this doesn't seem right. It doesn't meet the smell test. And sometimes you get a little feeling about something. I would trust it if you feel that. And um, there are some resources that we wanted to give you that could help you. We talked a lot about Polaris Project. They are also run the National Human Trafficking Task Hotline. So this number, 888-373-7888. So it's really 888-373-7888. That's how I remember it. It's like 888-373-7888. Or you can text help or info to be free 233-733, and that is the national. They will help you with so many resources. Trust your instincts. If you don't, even if you see something but you're not quite sure, you don't have to be sure. If it looks suspicious, call them. Use your phone. I can't tell you how many times I see something and I'm just snapping pictures. That's what it's there for. Can you imagine how many things you see in the news today would not have really gone to fruition if somebody had not taken a picture? So take pictures of it, keep it, and then send it to the hotline or send it to the FBI or the local law enforcement. Feel free. So call me. And I gave you my email address, morellr@ourmentofreedom.org, and my cell phone number. Text me. You can call ourmentofreedom.org, a Polaris Project, Shared Hope. These are all resources. NetSmart is Nick Mix. Um, it has so many good training and ideas, particularly for every age group, from young elementary to adults and to students, counselors, educators. That NetSmart org is just a wonderful source of resource for that. We just want you to really be informed, know what it looks like, know how to get resources, how to get help. Sometimes you don't know for sure, but you just want to run something past someone. It's okay to run a scenario past someone and ask them, I felt a little odd about this. Can you tell me what you think? And then someone should be able to help you. We um, are here to teach you how to protect yourself. So, we want you to know the facts, learn about online safety, guard your heart. Oh my goodness, guard your heart and be aware of your surroundings. If you see something, say something. Know that your heart is like the gateway to everything. So we want you to really guard your heart in this, especially pay attention to your surroundings. Give us a call if you have anything, if you want a presentation done, if you want us to come speak, if we want to know what children or youth in your area can do to have a conversation. We have so many projects, red sand projects. We have projects and when youth can join um, some after school programs we can develop at your school. We can come into your church and talk to you about this. You can volunteer at any level to learn about this. So come. We hope we gave you a little bit of information. Of course, it's not extensive, but we only had an hour. At this time, we're going to stop sharing our screen. We're going to open up some time for you all to just ask us anything that's on your heart that you want to ask that we didn't cover, and just have this really good conversation about trafficking. It's particularly minor sex trafficking. Any questions? I see your screen read, Richard. No questions? Oh, you're welcome. It is definitely because youth are so vulnerable. I mean, it is why traffickers target them. So we have to know better. You have to be aware that you're being targeted. You are being targeted because you are so precious. You are definitely the gems that you are. And because of that, people want to take advantage of you because you are so special. How different are males and versus females? Someone asked. And I can tell you in my experience with the FBI is that males are trafficked too, particularly transgender youth, like we talked about. Um, and they don't report. So males, if they are trafficked, they very rarely report. So I think it is a very hidden population. whether they are transgender or not, LGBTQ plus or not, they just don't report. So they don't feel comfortable enough to report. And I think that's a shame that because they are so vulnerable. So in my experience, I've had so many more females than males, but I think that's because we haven't done enough to let males understand that we can help them too. So if we don't get out there and get the word out there that, you matter and we care about you, then we probably won't get as many males coming forth um, to talk about it. My youngest victim, uh, a survivor, was 11 years old. So when people tell me this doesn't happen to you, it's not true. She was 11 years old. My average youth was about 15. So I had a ton of 15 and 16-year-olds who just felt lost and got caught up in something. And the road to healing, well, it is challenging, challenging. The trauma that they experienced was just enormous. But it's not the end of the world. What happened to youth does not define who they are and what they can grow to be. Sometimes they just need a little help. So it is a lot of help and a lot of people who want to help young people get there. So any questions, any more questions about what we can do or what you always wanted to know? Have you ever caught the trafficker? Oh, absolutely. That's what the FBI does so well. We all we caught the trafficker mostly because there's a lot of reasons. The victim, the survivor is very much a part of it. So sometimes if it's a love interest, she may not initially want to talk about the trafficking or the trafficker or give us information about it. But what we do know is that young people, 12, 13, 14, they can't get a hotel room. They can't advertise some of this stuff and pay and get all of these apparatus set up where they have a bank account and they can use Cash App and it goes to this. They can't do. So sometimes it's just that this enterprise getting the hotel room, getting a card, defining out how this works. Young people can't really do it. And so we can usually follow the trail and we do catch them. Um, in the federal court, the mandatory minimum sentence can be 10 to 20 years. So we do catch them and we do. Um, and they do. And for the child sexual abuse material or the pornography part of it, we don't necessarily need as much as the victim or the survivor to come forth because the pictures really tell the story. So they can get, I've seen um, pedophiles who have abused children and put their pictures on social media, inappropriate pictures, get 30, 40 years for that. And the difference between federal and state is that if you get a felony charge and they're prosecuted in federal court, you know how people get 25 years in the state level and they only serve like 5? Doesn't happen like that in federal court. When they get a felony charge, they generally serve most of their time. Um, how do you protect your child while in school? What is the risk factors for neurodiverse youth? Um, a lot of risk factors. How do you protect them in school? Education. I got to tell you, education is the single best thing. You can't stop the internet from happening. It's here to stay. The one thing we can do is educate and be there for them when things happen, to create an atmosphere where young people can come to us and talk to us about anything. And don't blame them, even if they make a poor decision. Yes, I got online with someone I shouldn't have, and I showed somebody part that I shouldn't have shown. Now they are and now they're asking and saying that they will do all these things to me if I don't do more. You know, you've got to come to someone. You got to come to someone and talk to us about it. We can shut that down because they are suffering the stress. I have so many youth that have considered, contemplated suicide, all kinds of things because they just feel like they feel responsible. And it's absolutely not true. So I just want you to say, you can do this. You don't have to suffer in silence. There are people, even if you can't go to your parents, find someone, call us, call the FBI. talk to someone and just say you need help. All you got to say, I need help, and we will help you get through it. Yes. We are working to try to educate teachers. I have done a lot of school with school social workers, psychology, all kinds of people. We have done a lot of information and stuff with them to do it. Counselors, all kinds of trustworthy people, they have to be educated. We need that so that they can really, really um, be informed and of what to do. So a lot of teachers and educators are being trained. Law enforcement is being trained, counselors are being trained, um, in the in the medical field. Even pediatricians are being trained on how to detect and what to do to help. So education is the key to me. It's just educating you. Youth are so smart. They get it. So they just need to have the tools. That means understand what it looks like and who to go to and how to shut it down, how to maneuver through this online stuff that is out there. You can do this. We know you can. Thank you so much for having us. We're here to help. So call us.